I'm George Robeson from the Truckee River Flood Management Authority. We're just going to give it a minute or two. A lot of people are still joining, so just want to give it another minute or so for all these people to get seated, if you will.
So I dropped a link to the meeting page on our website where you can download slides for this meeting and also view other information related to this meeting. Just getting a few more people coming in.
Okay, I think that we could probably get started about now. It's about 3:02. Probably about 10 other people have come on in the last minute or so. And people are still coming on, but I think it would be good to get started. And I just want to introduce the team that we're going to have on this. What we're going to do is we're going to have about a fairly long presentation about what the Rock-McCarran design is all about, where we are at in the design process, and some of the key issues that I think people will be concerned about, such as cost analysis, such as what are we doing for environmental control and other things like that. So this talk should cover most of those topics. Like I said, it is a fairly more involved talk than we normally do. And this is why we have these community outreach workshops to allow for more time to explain and then also to receive comments at the end. We typically allow generous questions and try to answer them even during that, which you usually don't see in public meetings very often, where we actually try to answer the questions or elaborate and try to figure out what the question is and things like that. So without further ado, Shane, if you could advance the slide for the Rock to McCarran Reach project. The speakers today will be myself. I'll be doing just the first few slides to set up the talk, and then Shane Dyer with JUB Engineers, who is the primary consultant on this project and has done most of the work. They will carry on and carry most of the rest of the talk. I may chime in if something comes in that's a little different, like, oh, that's a policy thing or something like that. I may jump in, but most of it will be Shane. And the purpose is to inform the public of what we're up to, what the progress is. We really want to not leave anything unhidden or unknown to people. We're trying to go out of our way to be very public about this and also to get comments from people. We do want comments. Comments have helped us with the design. There are things we've added because of comments and in this design and in other designs. So that was, it's very important to get those comments from the public. And a reminder, the primary objective is flooding. Although this is a really cool park, the primary objective is the flooding. Even the park, the main park component with all the fields and everything, that is a detention basin actually, and it is part of the flood project. Next slide, please. So the agenda is the background, the community outreach that was done, and then Shane will take over with the key design criteria, then go through the design features, the cost, and then outline the next steps. And then we'll have a time for questions, comments, input, feedback, etc. Next slide. So the background of this is this project has been going on for quite some time, since 2024. And in April of 2025, we did a pretty comprehensive alternatives analysis. I think the alternatives analysis is as long as the design report for the 60% design, for instance, a very comprehensive design. There were some design sheets involved. And then we also did kind of a second alternative analysis for a park alternative. We had one that was a nature park primarily, on everywhere, even up in the upper areas where we had the detention basin, or alternative where we had fields, soccer fields, things like that up in the upper area, play parks, other kind of more of a developed park type atmosphere in that area. The one that was chosen was a hybrid with the upper area having that and having the soccer fields and more refined park uh, experience. And then there's a large area. The larger area is the river corridor, which is more natural, and it's more about trying to handle those floods in the most optimized way possible and closer to the natural processes of the river as possible. Next slide, please. So this project has had a lot of community input, and I really appreciate that. Many of the people on the list here, I'm looking down the list. Thank you for inputting into this project. Even when I sounded grumpy, I was thankful. Okay, maybe I was grumpy to a couple of you, but we need to hear this, and we need to work through these things. So. We've had numerous working groups. Now we call them community outreach workshops about this to try to elicit comments, to try to explain what we're up to. We've had an in-person meeting early on. We've had technical advisory committee meetings, which are public meetings where there were comments, and we also explained the project there. And we've also done board meetings. So when you add it all up, it's about, I don't know, 15 to 20 meetings that we've had for this in various venues. And also the comments that we've received is well over 300 comments when you add everything together. And so the next slide, please. So with that, I'm going to give it over to you, Shane, and you can start talking about the design criteria and what is going into the 30% design.
Great. Thank you, George. Appreciate it. I would be remiss if I didn't call out some of my other team members too. So I'm Shane Dyer with JUB, and Wood Rogers has helped us a lot on the park, and NHC has been critical on the geomorphology, and Crawford Engineering is doing geotechnical on our team. So I would just kind of put that out there as a really big team of design consultants working on this. So in these key design criteria, our number one criteria is to protect from the 117-year flood event and keep that contained in the river corridor with 3 full freeboard, meaning you've got the levee, and then when the full flood comes through, there's 3 more feet until it reaches the top. So during that 117 year, there'll be 3 feet additional of protection. That's really representing that 97 flood. Is what we're kind of designing to, is the 97 flood. Another key criteria is we have to evaluate the downstream impacts and limit the 100-year peak flow increase at Vista Narrows to 2,400 CFS so that there's no adverse effects in the downstream. So that's really important. once the recreation complex came online, we had a new design criteria of protecting the recreation complex up to the 50 to 75-year event. So normal flooding will not affect the park. It has to be large flood events, 50 to 75-year event. It will activate and fill and take the peak off of the flood. And then generally we're attenuating flows. So we're trying to use that recreation area to attenuate the flood at the 100 and 117 years by capturing some of it where the park is. All right, so I'm going to kind of break this up into 4 parts: the flood and river corridor improvements, the environmental design, the transportation design, and then the nature park and recreation design. So kind of the park design. So I'll go through those 4 sections. For the flood and river corridor, the big parts of this are, of course, the levees, which we have the 3 levees: the north, middle, or the north internal and the south levee. And I'm going to show you those. And then we have this internal berm goes right down the middle, if you can see my cursor, and I'm going to show you this as well. This protects the park. And then we've got the geomorphology. We had an assessment that helps us to establish the river corridor, the geometry of the river itself. Like, how does this work? How do we optimize it? How do we create habitat? How do we make it natural? And then we put it all together and optimize the whole system. And so in the plans, in the 30% plans, I threw this up so you can kind of see what it looks like. This is the existing. You can see the existing river right here. That's Rock Bridge. We come down here. There's some commercial kind of confining it on both sides. And then there's McCarran. And this is the whole project site. That's what it looks like in the plans. Here's the grading plan from the 30% plans. And right here is the main river. If you can follow my cursor, I'm going to show it in a little more clearly in future slides. But this is what the 30% plans look like. Now I'm going to blow it up for you. So again, these are grading lines, and right here on my cursor is where the main river goes down. So this is what the grading plan looks like for the proposed river. And it's hard to visualize that. So we have some other things to help, but let me get back to where the levees are. So this is the north levee right here. You can see it represented graphically. And then we've got the internal berm, and it's this paved path on top of a berm that goes right there. That's the internal berm that protects the park. And then we have the south levee, and this is what contains the whole flood on the south side against the Mill Street right there. So you can kind of see that where those levees are. And then the retention basin, to kind of put a fine point on it here that we keep talking about, is everything south of that internal berm. It's here. It's the shaded area south of the internal berm and north of the levee right here in this shaded area. And this is a critical feature of the flood containment. All right, so let's go through what this looks like from a flooding perspective, or just from a river flow perspective. This is the average low flow on the Truckee River. It's a 350 CFS. So it's designed to look like this at the average low flow. So in low flow conditions, generally, it's going to look like this. And then we're going to go through a bunch of recurrence intervals. So this is a 2-year event. And when I say 2-year event, that's the percent chance that it'll happen. So like for a 2-year event, it has a 50% chance of happening in any given year. So it's a 50% chance that it'll happen every year. When I say 100-year event, it has a 1% chance of happening any given year. It doesn't mean it takes every 100 years. It means it has a 1% chance each year. So that's your 2-year. And you can see that, the channels are activating on the north there. We get more activation. 3-year event, really all channels activated. 5-year event. So this is we're getting into a fairly large flow here with 6,000 CFS. 10-year event, 7,500 CFS. 20 with 91. You can kind of see it growing there and inundating. This is a 50-year storm. So now we're into big storm territory. And 75-year, and this is really the last event before the recreation area and the detention gets activated and starts to attenuate the peak or bring down the peak of the flow at the larger storms. That's 17,000 CFS. Then we jump into the 100-year storms. This is the 20,734 CFS. So big storm, fully activated in there. All right. So, and you may want to study those. You can download the slides. They're really cool pictures and images. So this, I wanted to just jump into some of the revetment, and that means some of the protection, like the erosion protection along the river. And a lot of times when you see these projects, you'll see erosion protection all the way up and down the river. And what we've done is we've worked really hard to minimize. So everything in black here is where the velocities, we haven't been able to reduce them enough and so we have to put in some kind of erosion protection. But we've been able to reduce a lot of the potential erosion protection and confine it to limited areas so that we're not doing a whole bunch of like rock on the slopes everywhere that doesn't look natural. And I'll kind of show you. So kind of here's these black areas, kind of keep that in your mind. And when I say what erosion protection looks like, this is what riprap looks like. And we've really tried to reduce the riprap amount and move to other forms. Like over here on the far right is a vegetated riprap. And that's much more desirable from a natural perspective. These bank attached log jams and using woody debris and using logs is something that we have proposed, and root wads as well, potentially, and then vegetated articulated concrete blocks is a potential, and then vegetated geocell as well. So these are some of the things that we're working with, and we're really trying to reduce the overall riprap up in that left-hand corner. We don't want that as much as we want the rest of them that look more natural. And so we've worked hard to reduce the amount that we need in total, and in the places that we are using them, we're trying to use natural solutions. And bioengineering. That is out of order. Okay, so here's the plans. Just wanted to show you some site sections, some cross sections, and this right here is a cross section through the middle. Right there, you can see it, and in the plans it looks like this. So you're starting on the one side, on the north side, and moving to the south side. I'm gonna do it we prepared this figure, which we felt like was a little more clear, still a little cryptic if you're not used to looking at this kind of plan, but you really start here at 0 and you go over that north levee and you start going into this channel here, moving on to some wooded areas, down into another channel with terraces. So when we talk about terraces, you'll see this is where we're trying to capture. We're trying to create habitat. We're trying to inundate them at very certain storm levels, like more often, so that we can grow certain types of vegetations for the riparian zone. So this is what the terrace is looking like. These are terraces. And then these are vegetated areas. And then we're coming across, this is the main channel here. And then we've got one more side channel. And then we come into this internal berm. And you can see these lines are where the flood will be in the river area. So at a 5-year, it's down here kind of inundating all the channels, but it just goes up from there, where you get the 75-year, 50-year, 70-year, 75-year, and then 100-year. And you can see that 100-year max in the recreation area. So this would be kind of that formal recreation area where there's some fields and things like that, and where we're doing some of the retention. All right, so these got out of order. I'm going to show you, this is a cross section right here. And I have a video, which is really cool. So it has a render that I'm just going to play. Some of you may have seen this before, but I'm going to play this so that you can kind of see and get an idea of what we're looking at. So there's that first channel close to the north levee, and you're coming across. Secondary channel. You can see where the flood, generally how high those floods will be. Here comes the main river channel as we go across that area. And then this is all just going to be nature trails and nature area in there, and then we hit that internal berm, which will be a paved path. And then we hit into the recreational space itself, where this is where we have more of the formal fields and the parks as we're coming across this. And then we have the south levee here and Mill Street. And this will also be paved right there. So let's see if I can get out of this. All right. So those are the cross sections. Okay, and that's what we really had to kind of show and showcase the kind of the flood corridor. And now I'm going to move into the environmental design. So for the environmental design, we had an environmental scan done at the beginning. And the environmental scan was really, what are the existing conditions? What can we, and then make improvements? How should we improve this? And, they found that the river corridor is very degraded. It has lots of riprap. It's incised, poor condition. And then they made a lot of recommendations on how to fix it with the terracing, increased habitat, backwater channels, and things like that to create the habitat area and the natural area and return it to a more natural state of a river. One of the things they found in the environmental scan was a Mexican Brazilian free-tailed bat. And many of you may know this, that they're under the McCarran Bridge. They live under that McCarran Bridge. So we've had meetings with Department of Wildlife, NDOW, to discuss the project and how we could mitigate the issue of the bats being underneath the bridge there. And they've been receptive, and we're working through that as part of this 30% design. And then the terrace zones, obviously, the terrace zones is what are represented in this image down below. We really worked with the environmental team to identify, maximize the riparian zones and the natural areas, and then identify the terracing zones, and working back and forth with the hydraulics people to get the water where we need it, and then get the right plants at the right elevations. And then another thing that was a big part of this 30% was a monitoring and success criteria. So we really looked at, okay, when this is totally done, how are we going to monitor it, and how are we going to say it was successful? And so TURFMA had us put together, hey, what does success look like? And so that we can design towards that success. Success looks like fully developed plants over this amount of time, and we'll do the surveys in this manner to establish the success. So that was all part of this environmental design element. One of the things that we did was we had a preservation of the existing tree stands. So there was a big, scan of the whole thing. We had all the trees, and they identified these mature tree stands to keep in place, to keep the shading, to leave the habitat. There is a few non-native species among them, but for the most part, we've got a good number of native species. So we're protecting these zones, and we also had to do kind of our geomorphology design around these protected zones to make sure that we had mature trees still in the park and in the nature area. All right, so the meander belt itself, this is an important calculation, that the geomorphologists worked on, coming up with how wide should the belt be? How wide? What would make it a living river? And it comes up with a meander belt of 600 to 800 feet to allow for that living river. And for the entire length of the project, we meet or exceed the meander belt requirements, except for right against the bridges. And that's a unique thing to be able to do in an urban setting. Usually, you've got buildings and everything, and essentially, they've been able to procure the farms and all the commercial areas, and to actually make a meander belt that can allow for a truly natural design. Alternative revetment types, that's been important. So that erosion protection types like that riprap, reducing the riprap, using vegetated ripraps, geocells, woody debris, and stream restoration, really bioengineering techniques to try and really make it natural. So we're really working with the bioengineering on the environmental design. Habitat creation, lots of habitat creation in the terracing, in the riparian zones, overbank habitat. We actually have 2 backwater channels where it's going to be for fish rearing that are designed right into it, that were recommended by the fish specialists. And we're going to work on a riffle pool sequence in the 60% design, but there's a very designed riffle pool sequence that's also going to help with habitat and for the fish. The preservation of the tree stands, obviously I showed you those 3 designated areas where we're preserving the existing tree stands. And then the last thing that we had there was we used reference sites to revegetate the terrace. So there's a lot of existing sites and a lot of studying that's been done on some of the older sites, like at 102, McCarran and Lockwood and Mustang, where they've been able to document success and what species and how that. And so we're using reference sites to help guide this process. So this is just a representation again of the terracing and what it looks like. And we had 4 distinct zones where there's a different species list that we're going to be planting in each distinct zone, with the stream channel, the wetland bench, the riparian bench, and then that upland area. So really working through like how do we deal with each inundation level, how often they get wetted, what species live there, what's the habitat, what animals like for the habitat. A couple more things on the environmental design. We've implemented bioswales into the design, so that reduces runoff. Bioswales are just like an area, like you can see down here in this picture on the right. Instead of running the water off into the river or a stream, we run it into like the island, and then it sits in the island and infiltrates. There's another one proposed right along here as an example by this linear park. This is all this bioswale that will collect water and infiltrate. And that's a much more environmentally friendly way to treat the water through the soils rather than running right into the river. The other thing about the river itself is it's protected within the internal berm. So that internal berm, there is going to be 0 direct runoff from irrigation during like irrigating and small storms in the park area directly into the river, because the internal berm doesn't allow it. It will all infiltrate or go down, run to the end and go through a little treatment before it gets released. But we're trying to get it all into bioswales and things like that. So the runoff concerns, this will reduce the risk of pollutions making it to the river with that protection of that internal berm. Couple other items here, the dark sky lighting. So we're doing the dark sky where it only points down. Treated effluent, we're going to use rather than use drinking water. We're proposing to use the treated effluent so that it's a secondary or gray water for the irrigation. And then we're doing a lot of strategic landscaping in the design to do a low impact development design. Okay, we're on to transportation. I'm talking a lot here. You're probably tired of listening to me. I'm sorry. We don't have too far to go. All right, transportation, roads and parking. So as part of the 30% design, we have a preliminary layout for the park access, the routes, the internal park roads, and the parking lots. And then we also have the site access where the public will be able to access the sites. The 2 public access sites are off of Mill Street, and then there's 4 total access sites. So 2 emergency access sites, those will be on Rock and McCarran, where the main accesses will be on Mill. And I'll show you those here. So this is the transportation layout that you can see. And you'll see the main roads are in gray, and the main access locations off Mill are here in these 2 green circles. And you go in and then up and over the South Levee, then you have access in here. You can see the parking layout for the stalls. We have the parking numbers there identified. And then we also have, these are the emergency access locations on the east and west. So on Rock and McCarran. And we'll be working with the city of Reno. Now that we have these designs in place, we'll meet with the city of Reno and try to understand their requirements and make sure that all the requirements are met as we move forward on that. Okay, so that's transportation. And now we jump into the nature park and recreation complex. And I feel like this is what a lot of people really want to see. It's very interesting. It's exciting. And I personally love the flooding part and design, but this is pretty cool stuff. I'm really excited about it. So we did a lot of public outreach to figure out what was going on. And in the end, it was, as George had mentioned earlier, it was the the combination of doing a nature park and a recreation complex. And that was, in the end, it was recommended by the technical advisory committee, and then approved, selected and approved by the board of directors also to move forward with the combined approach. And the theming of the park itself is a cohesive, like a celebration of the Truckee River, its natural processes, history, and community value. So here's the layout, and I think you've been seeing it as we've been going, but just kind of leave that up there for a second. We've got 3 river access points at the top, middle, and bottom. We've got trails all throughout, parks, and then we've got the actual soccer complex, or the flat field complex. And we'll walk through some of these here. We'll kind of highlight what some of them are. So first we have the iconic play park structure. So this is kind of a location map here. You can see on the right where this is in the park on the corner of Rock and Mill. This fits in it. This is a render of what it could, or a picture of what it could potentially look like up on that edge. We've got the linear adventure park. This is, you can see there the reference where it's at, kind of against that internal berm. Looks like this. We've got some slides on the South Levee aesthetics, the potential South Levee aesthetics here, and what they look like, what it might look like when you're driving down Mill Street. And then we've got, this is a rendition of all the trails layouts here. So you can see a pretty significant trail system. The large orange dashed lines are the asphalt, the paved trail system. And then the smaller kind of yellow orange lines are the nature paths and trail, like hiking type trails. All right, so in this, we broke out some phasing due to the costs. And so I'm just going to talk a little bit about the base phasing and the supplemental phasing. And you can see here that everything in green is part of the recreational base. So what's currently in the budget. And then the recreational phasing is a little bit beyond what the budget has for this park. So I'm going to kind of go through it. Here is the base. That's without the supplemental. So you'll see the yellows are gone. It really includes the main trail systems and some of the, most of the fields, 8 fields. It is missing 3 fields there, one a smaller one and 2 full-size fields. So here's just a representation of what the base, this is what it includes. You know, we just threw this up there. Okay, it's going to have the field still. It's still going to have the floodable bathrooms and the linear park and some of the play structures, the river access and the river corridor trail, and some of the entry monumentation. Some of the entry monumentation. So let me show you as we go through on the supplemental, you see what it cuts out here. So these are the areas that are not included from a cost perspective. It pulls out one of the 2 play type parks, this iconic park, some of the expensive monumentation along the frontage of Rock-McCarran, 3 of the fields, some of the levee aesthetics are out on this one. All of the field lighting, so there would be no field lighting on this. And let me show you what pictures of that looks like. So these are the things that would be removed. So that park, the field lighting, these are the designs right now, the preliminary designs for like the iconic monument that would go on the corners, and the wayfinding and signage that's that expensive wayfinding, and then some of this design and aesthetic things on the levee would be phased as well. All right, so that brings us to the cost estimate, and you can see here the base cost is 92 million, and then when you add that supplemental, the two that we just kind of split out there, we get to 104 million on those costs. Going to jump through here. So we may come back to that, but I'll just jump through. We're almost to the end here. It's gone fairly quickly. So the 30% design plan set at the end here, in total, we ended up with 205 sheets that really outline what this 30% design looks like for the community. And where we're at in the process here is on step 3, so step 2 was the 30% design, and now part of the process is show everyone the 30% design and get the feedback so that we can implement it into our 60% design and take the community's feedback and make sure that we get it in there. And then beyond that, it goes into permitting final design and then construction. So that is it. What'd I miss, George? How'd I do?
You did great. And just some of those sign names like Turfma River Park, those are not what we're doing for sign names that we're not at that stage yet, but they had to put something on the sign, so that's what's on there right now. So, there's a lot of different name ideas floating around, so I don't want to presume that that was the name of the park. I doubt seriously it'll be Turfma River Park. So just to be clear on that. Also, on the phasing, this is more of a policy budget type issue, and on that is the estimate. The last estimate I think you guys did was about 77 million. I had inflationed it up to about 87 million. And honestly, we really can't, I don't think we can really build the whole flood project if this thing is over 90 to 95 million. So that is why there is phasing going on with this park. Like build the flood project when we have money, come back to it. Or if people go, I want lighting, they can do a crowdsourcing or something like that and get the lighting from some other source. So we're trying to get a good basic park that has a lot of nice features in it, but for the extra stuff like the extra play park, the lighting, the other 3 fields, all that, that would be something that we'd have to do later, or it would have to come from a different source, is the way we're looking at it, just from a budgeting policy standpoint. So with that, I think we should ask for questions or comments. I already saw a comment, there's 1,000 too many parking spots. So we've all been kind of doing that, but not 1,000. We would say, oh, there's probably 500 extra parking spots there. Why so many? And so that would, if somebody has that question, that'd be a fun one to put out there for the team.
Yeah.
Mary, you have a question?
Oh, sorry, I thought my microphone was off. There is a question by Jeff Dixon. What was the parking model? He's in the chat.
Let's see.
Let me pull up that chat.
Jeff Dixon, what was the parking model used to determine the number of parking spots per field?
I'll have to talk with the transportation. In initial meetings, the parks people, Nate Smith from City of Reno, wanted a minimum of 40 per field. But then there was some other, that's a great question, and we can take that down and get back with you. There is, the transportation people have a methodology for that, and I don't have it off the top of in the front of my mind now. So, but we'll get back to you on that.
Okay. Any other? Oh, here we got a question. Looks ELLSM.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
Um, I noticed the term that continues to be used over the years is a 100-year flood. I think over the past 40 years, we've had four floods or close to four floods. Why is that term still being used out there?
Can I handle that one,
Yeah.
Shane? Yeah, the reason that term is being used is because uh, that FEMA uses the 100-year flood for their insurance planning. In any kind of levy that we would do needs to meet criteria for a 100-year flood that would help with flood insurance. So because of those federal guidelines, we are stuck with that terminology for now. I know the feds themselves are actually talking about getting away from that. Um, the 100-year flood, as it's put down, is probably not the 100-year flood in terms of the last 40 to 50 years, it looks larger. That is one of the reasons that I pushed for to have it be the 97 flood plus 3 feet. So that is a bigger flood plus 3 feet of freeboard, which makes it a much larger flood that would protect from. So I don't want to, have a 110-year flood and have the whole thing not work because I think they're far more common than what we think, based on data, based on gauge analysis, for instance. So that is why we have a little bit stronger standard on our levies, actually quite a bit more strenuous than just the 100-year flood.
All right.
Thank you. Can I go on to another question here?
Could you state your
Um,
name also for the record? Just
my name is Martin Shudziński, Siudzzinski.
appreciate it.
Uh, I've also noticed that um, for some reason, uh, this flood has been happening way before, I say, 1950s, 1930s. The flood has been happening quite regularly. Yet over the years, I think it was the City of Sparks Planning Department, City of Sparks City Council, construction companies, and current owners decided to build directly in a floodplain, knowing that when it floods, there's going to be millions and millions and millions of dollars worth of damage. Who exactly is going to be paying for this project? It's a beautiful project, fields, recreation space, wonderful. Levees, obviously, seem to be about 100 years behind the curve here. Where are you going to get the money to pay for this?
Okay, nice. That's a good question. So after the 97 flood, the county passed a tax for flood mitigation. And so it has been taking us a great deal of time to get this together. I'll be honest, it seems like there was a couple of false starts in that we were trying to work with the Army Corps of Engineers and other things, and those things did not work out. But now we have momentum, and we're trying to. So this has been going on since about 1998. We've been saving money or spending money. Like for instance, the property that all this is on was bought in the 2000s. So the reason why there's room for these meanders and frankly, having a wider meander belt makes it so we don't have to make the levees so tall. So it actually decreases cost on that end. And it also makes the revetments cheaper. That's like the bank and bed protections cheaper because velocity is slightly lower or somewhat lower. So all that put together, that's money that's already been spent, and that's tens of millions of dollars to acquire the land that was floodable over there on that side. And as far as Sparks, it wasn't just Sparks, it was Reno, it was Washoe County, as well as Sparks, where people in past decades thought the flood was much smaller than it really was. And so they thought they could get away with much less levee, flood wall type structure. So they built very close to the river and they thought they had it solved, but as the 1950 floods showed, they didn't. And of course, the 97 flood also showed that. And there's been more floods than that. There's been a 2005 flood, there's been a 1986 flood, a smaller 2017 flood. They're not as big as the 97 flood, but they still can cause damage. So the idea here is we do want to get the flood mitigation. The money that we have for that was a measure passed by the county, and that is what TURFMA is based on. And we are run by a board with elected officials from all three entities, from Reno, Sparks, and Washoe County. And so that's what we have for money to do this. And we're also trying to work with federal partners for grant funds and things of that nature as well. So that's how we're getting our money for this. And honestly, we do have money and cash flow to do these projects. Probably not the big one with all the extra amenities, but the base park I think we can afford. And I've done a strategic plan on that to try to figure that out with interest rates and all that. So I hope that helps you.
So you have most of the money. What percentage of the money do you have?
Well, you mean of all the money that's been collected over the last 25 years?
Right.
We currently have about $77 million in reserve. About $48 million was spent to buy the land that Rock-McCarran is on. Other money was spent for, just operating expenses, working with the Corps and other things. But basically, most of the money, I would say that over half the money that has been expended in the tax is sitting there in savings and was expended to buy that property, well over half. So I can't break it down off the top of my head like that, but I do have those numbers if it was absolutely necessary. But in the strategic plan, I did break that down for the year 2021 a few years back.
Okay. Will there be a special assessment put on the businesses that have been involved in the floods over the years?
My position has been, and there's board members on this audience, has been that we do not need a special assessment. The tax that we have, if we save up money and we do it right, is sufficient to build this project. And we're trying to supplement with federal grants on top of that. So we're trying to do it without doing anything like that. We have not. There was a time where we asked for some money back in, I believe it was 2018, and they said no. And since then, we have not asked, and I have not even thought to ask for more money from the local citizenry. I'm trying to build the project on a budget and use existing resources.
Well, as a citizen, I did not sit on a planning board. I did not sit on the city council. I did not build a commercial business down in that area, and nor do I own a commercial business down in that area. And I know the citizens passed the tax, but the point I'm trying to making is people go ahead and they build in a floodplain, and then they say, "Oh, we have a mess. Look at the mess we have. Let's get the citizens to pay to clean up the mess that we have." How many future projects are going to be built in floodplains in Washoe County, in the state of Nevada, where you're going to go ahead and, okay, we've got a mess. Let's put up a bond, ask the taxpayers to clean up the mess that the elected officials and the construction industry made.
Well, like I said,
Are we going to have future messes the way we have this mess
well,
here over the past 40 years?
okay, well, there is a difference now in that we have enacted codes. We've enacted a special flood zone code in the 2000s, and we've enacted other codes to try to prevent development in the floodplain. I'm working with Congress right now through the federal avenue to obtain some land downstream for turf moss so that somebody doesn't get that land on a federal giveaway and then build something. So we are trying to slow uh, floodplain development or stop it. And there's many measures that each city and the county has for that at this point that they did not have 30 or 40 years ago. And frankly, they did not know the extent of this flooding. They used to think that a 100-year flood was 14,000 CFS. They now think that the 100-year flood is on the order of 20,000 CFS. So that's a big difference. And so there was a little bit of ignorance involved, and we're learning. But as we learn about what these systems can do, and we have stricter laws, we are slowly stopping floodplain development. However, when we have a floodplain that's fully developed and there's all these infrastructure in the floodplain, if that floodplain gets hammered, it's a very big hit on the community. For instance, the airport is in the floodplain. Without an airport for a couple of weeks, that affects our economy. Many of the floodplain, there's things in the floodplain that produce a lot of sales tax, a lot of property tax. Without those in their floodplain, the community takes a massive hit. So with what we have now and the situation we have now, how do we deal with this? And I think the best way to deal with this is to mitigate this. For instance, this project is estimated to cost plus or minus $200 million total. We've already got 77 million saved up. We have the cash flow to be able to borrow the rest, and we may even get federal grants. If we had another 97 flood today, that would cost $2.5 billion of economic damage. So the benefit cost ratio of this project is on the order, cost forward wise, is higher than 3. So it makes sense with what we have now to deal with it. Now, what we did in the past, I can't justify or, it is what it is. I can't do anything about. Going forward, I think I agree with you. We need to have stringent restrictions on developing in the floodplain. And I think there's many people on this call here that work on that for the cities and the counties and federal, et cetera, state. So we're trying to slow that down or stop it. But right now, we got to deal with what we have in the floodplain, such as the airport.
For
So that's
sure.
my answer to that.
For
We
sure.
want to
So
mitigate.
an ounce of prevention is worth $3 billion worth of cure.
Give
So
or take.
I certainly support that the county officials, the city officials, all these individuals that seem to be in the hands of the construction industry uh, get serious about all construction and not put it in any floodplains.
Um,
I don't know why
excuse me.
people can't see
Can
basic common sense,
can
and
we,
and
I
then
really appreciate your comments, sir.
the problem
Can we
gets
bounce
dumped
around to
on
some
the
other
general
people now?
public. So thank you for your answers, and I hope everybody pushes all the elected officials not to let a mess like this happen again.
Great questions. Thank you very much. But I want to try and give some other people a chance to talk, and we
Sure,
really
I'm done.
appreciate.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Go
thank
ahead.
you. All right. Let's go to D Mills.
Hi, this is Dick Mills, and my question is, does this design propose the taking of private land up on the north side at all?
That is a great question. And the answer is, except for a very small sliver that we haven't even approached them on yet because we're trying to still work out a way without doing anything. No, not a single thing. There is a little bit of a sliver up by the Rock Bridge, and I don't want to get into that because we haven't approached the owner. But other than that, no. The reason we moved the river south was to avoid that and the cost associated with those kind of activities. That was a big factor in moving the river down a bit. Shane, do you want to elaborate on that at all?
I think I think you got it there. We really kept out of the private property on the north. I mean, there may be some tiny, very small impacts that we'll have to work out, but they are very minimal. We won't have to buy or demolish any buildings.
And then will you raise the levees up on that area, or are they sufficient the height they are now?
The levees will change. Those levees are not built to today's standard of care. There'll be new levees built on that north side. The alignment's slightly different than the current, and there'll be new paths on tops of the new levee on the north that replace the old levee and old path.
Do you know about how many feet up it's going to go?
It varies across the project. On north, it's not that high.
That's close enough for me. So, okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
3 to 6 feet in general. I mean,
Yeah.
I've been looking at these plans and going cross-eyed.
Well, I appreciate it. Thank you guys for what you do. I appreciate you guys.
Thank you. All right, so I'm gonna go next to Art
Oops.
Rangel. Art, you're still muted if you want to talk.
Oh, okay. How's that?
That's better.
Okay, great. I want to thank the authority for this. This is so desperately needed. I've been following this for about a year, and after finding out the devastation that these floods have done in the industrial areas, at this point, it's been really, really uh, badly needed for a long time. And the innovation that you guys and your team that you put together seem extremely well qualified to do this. My big issue is, and I've spoken to this before, I really see the flat fields as an economic opportunity for bringing tournaments to the area that we need to change our trajectory in this region to get away from the game into something that's more sustainable. I felt for a long time that our biggest asset in this region is our great outdoors. And to having things like this where people can come from other places to experience what we have and actually fill up some vacant casino beds, spend money in Reno Sparks and Washoe County. I mean, all of those three entities have serious budgetary problems. So I really see the flat fields as being a possibility. I'm a little disappointed that not all 11 of them can be finished at one time. Would there be a way, if we get tournaments here, that those tournaments could help pay to maybe generate some revenue for the authority to maybe accelerate the development of the remaining fields? And when might those fields, the first set of fields, be ready for activation?
I'll start this answer and then maybe we'll chime in with Shane and maybe even David over here. But we're anticipating construction in 28, 29. So they could be ready as early as late 29, fall of 29, the first 8. There's about 200 plus commenters that agree with what you're saying from last year. There were roughly about 200 comments like that. So you're not alone in that particular feeling or position. And so that is something we know about, and we've been working with different parks representatives from Reno and other places to see what we can do. And a lot of other people that represent different sport leagues and everything else have talked to us. So there's a lot of possibilities out there, but we feel like we should do a base level in the detention basin of players. So anyways, I hope that helps you. Yeah, there are some ideas out there about that, about how to to do that, but they're not really, solid yet until we get probably further along in design.
Okay, well, thank you so much. Appreciate it.
All right. Thank you, Art. I'm gonna go jump over to the chat. We have a pretty good amount of them in here. I'm gonna start with Marisa. She says that if she remembers correctly, oops, sorry, that's my alarm. If she remembers correctly, the areas that are north of the internal levee get flooded often, up to 2 times a year or more. What kind of walking path surface is planned for these trails?
So with the new design, the walking trails on the north levee will be asphalt, and the water won't get up to them. And then the natural trails will be like an earthen or a DG compacted or a natural trail state. So there may be maintenance that has to happen on the trails that are down further in the flood area, but there'll be a natural, hiking type walking path, not like a concrete or an asphalt in the nature area.
Okay. And then the next question is from the Lahontan Audubon Society. They would like to know what designs or actions NDOW has suggested to protect the bats under the bridge.
Endow came out with a list of recommendations. Construction in the off season when they're gone down to the south, down to Mexico, and then also potentially, depending on health concerns with the guano, having different gates in certain seasons is one of their suggestions for mitigation. But we're still working with them. And it's really early to kind of have that finalized, but they do have a few suggestions like that.
Awesome. Okay, and then the next one is from Tom Pyatt. He says, is there going to be a pedestrian bridge or walkway across the river on the bridge side in order to accommodate access from the existing riverwalk to the proposed walkways on the south side of the river? And then he said, Rock Street Bridge.
Yeah, great question. So the proposal that we've put to Department of Wildlife, NDOW, is to go under the bridge and then up to the pedestrian bridge that is on the east side of McCarran. So we would connect to the Tahoe Pyramid Bikeway and the trails that are on the north and the other park systems up there, like the Rock Park and the Glendale Park. So yes, the plan is to connect so you can cross the river, but we have to go under the bridge. And that's why we're working with NDOW to make sure we can get under that bridge safely and not disturb the bats.
Mm-hmm. Okay, and then we have another one from Marisa. She's talking about the nature park area beyond the linear park, which seems to include different channels of the riverbed. She wants to know if there's any danger that users of that part of the park might be endangered by quickly rising waters, or are water levels expected to rise slowly during flood events?
Yeah, I mean, it will be a standard flood. And so you'll have indications like the water rising. It won't be a flash flood event in this part of the river. It won't be a flash flood. There will have been rain. It'll be stormy, things like that. It'll be a rain on snow event, things like that. So yeah, there is definitely danger and there'll be certain signs, but it won't be like a wall of water that would surprise you like a flash flood.
Okay. And then the next one is, will the basic level of financing allow for all the natural improvements of the river channel and the nature park, including bank revetment and selecting appropriate plant communities as was presented in the slides?
The answer to that is yes.
All right. And then the next one, let's see. Jerry Wager says he thinks the intervening years provide a great opportunity to at least add lighting to the initial fields. Jeff Dixon would like a copy of the strategic plan. I am working on getting that uploaded in just a moment here. The Lahontan Audubon Society says, will the geese that will likely be attracted to the soccer fields be an issue for the airport?
That's a great consideration. One that we've spoken with the airport, and we are not allowed to put trails on the south side of the river going under rock and continue those. And so the airport's aware of the project, and we haven't received any comments on the geese yet, but they are aware of the project. And George is working with them on the whole river, on different parts of the river as well. So they're aware.
All right, and we have a comment from Lucia Starbuck. She wants to know if there were considerations for more natural parking lots instead of just plain asphalt.
We definitely talked about it. The costs go up significantly as you use things like permeable pavers or permeable asphalt. So there's major costs involved with those things. And with the current runoff all being kept within the internal berm, it also infiltrates. So you could do permeable, but we're going to still infiltrate it, just not at the location of the parking lot itself. So there won't be any direct runoff into the river, which is the point of a permeable asphalt or a permeable paver. So we think that we're capturing that okay while keeping the costs reasonable.
What causes the cost to go up so significantly?
It's just the product. Like asphalt's cheap, but like a permeable asphalt, the way that it's designed, it's quite expensive. And a permeable paver, same thing. It's like just a much more expensive product, much more expensive to prepare and to buy.
Okay. So that looks like all the questions in the chat. Does anybody else have a question that they would like answered?
Or comments.
Or
And
comments.
I want to make sure that we highlight the fact that if you want to make a comment like, hey, like I think there's too many parking spots, I might even make that comment myself. But it's turfma@washoucounty.gov. So if you, it's right here on the website, on the PowerPoint. So that is the address for the email. If you have a comment like, you really ought to figure out a way to, go to supplemental immediately, or hey, there's too many parking lots, or did you consider this other thing? Would you consider this other thing? Just that's a great place, and we are going to have an open comment period until July 3rd. And we receive comments anytime, but we wanted to have a month where people have a chance to give comments, and that then we can summarize them to the consultant for the 60%.
Okay. I posted a link to the most recent strategic plan. I think that's the most recent one, George, in the chat. And then Lucia also wants to know, are there concerns that a major flood could take place before this project is completed?
There is always a chance of a major flood if this is going to be constructed in 2029. That is there's 2 more solid winters between that. That would give you some for a 100-year flood. That would give you, if you're thinking that way, about a 2% chance of that happening, a little over 2% actually. So, in a probabilistic sense, yeah, there's always a chance of a flood happening. And so that's one of the reasons I want to get this done so quickly. I don't want to wait around for a flood to happen before we
Right.
have this built.
All right. And it looks like we have a hand up from Ellen.
Hi, this is actually Roger. As most of you know, I work on Ellen's phone. Are you hearing me okay?
Yeah, we can hear you.
So I had a couple of comments. First of all, I want to thank you guys for letting people have the chance to comment on the report. It's certainly a big endeavor that's been gone through here. I really appreciate all the time. I see why it took them a year longer than what they hoped for. So um, first of all, on the river realignment, I realized you needed to move it off the north bank so you could get this, but the current one has an awful lot of river work done. I was wondering if there's any other options as far as getting the same job done, because this is a flood control uh, and it's also a cost problem. So right now, of course, the river has moved a long ways from where it was. It runs through the middle of farmers' fields and pastures, and so it's away from a lot of the trees and other things that were there, although some of the trails do cover that. It also looks like in the lower part of the river, it does destroy some of the trees, and I understand that. I did have another comment on your retention basin. Having looked at what's there, it's right now, if you look at the total flooded area that is proposed, mainly the farm area, it's about that retention basin that you show represents about 2% of the total flooded area with a 100-year flood. And it also represents only about 10 minutes of flow during a storm that probably lasts for 1 or 2 days. So my comment is that retention basin doesn't really look like it does a lot to help us. But on the other hand, it would be possible to, if it was able to move the levee down the middle. At one time, there were 3 proposed locations for levees. One was right along the river. I understand that was the Corps' idea. Then there was one that was down the middle of the property. That was another idea that came up. And then the third one was along Mill Street. So running it down the middle, of course, makes it much shorter, saves it quite a bit of money, makes a lot less demonstrate. You don't have to demo nearly as much material, and it also then totally protects all the ball fields and all of the other areas. Plus, the construction isn't working right along the 2 busy roads, which are McCarran and Mill Street. As far as the McCarran Bridge, looking at the report, figures 13 and 14, a little bit confusing on how they actually look like they are narrower than before you did this. So I would think it'd be really hopeful or helpful both for a flood control and for the bats to look at putting a culvert underneath there and getting the people away from going underneath the bridge and also opening it up, because right now, as you see on all your figures and diagrams, the McCarran Bridge is clearly a notch point that holds back water into the whole area. The last one was the current location of the maintenance area is about as far away from the ball fields as you can get it. It kind of looked like it was an afterthought. It's at that location, of course, there's no water, no electric, no gas, no sewer. But if you look, you have other options in this whole area. There's another area that has all of the existing facilities as well as existing buildings and is also on a raised area above the flood zone. So those are the comments that I had as far as what you might look at or consider, as since you're only at a 30% design, you've got quite a bit of flexibility on making changes to that. So thank you for your time.
Thanks, Roger.
I could do a couple
Anybody?
responses there. Essentially, we looked at a lot of different alignments, like hundreds of different ways to do this, and we really maximized the meander belt and the environmental improvements to the river. Could we hold it where it is? Yes, and that's not as natural. Could we go through the middle? Yes, and we'd have to wipe out the existing trees. The way that we've done it maximizes using the land and space that we have, putting it down the middle of a meander belt, maximizes habitat. It really is the best configuration that we found, and we went through a lot of configurations. So I think that would be kind of a first comment. In terms of the detention basin itself, it may look like it's not doing much, but if you look at the hydrograph, if you don't have it, the amount of water going through goes up, and when you do have it, the amount of water going through goes down. And that's really the key, because we cannot increase the amount of water going through. And so, yeah, you may have some, things that you were able to draw up, but the models tell the truth in that the water is reduced using the retention basin, and that is what we need. And so that's why the retention basin is so functional. With regard to the McCarran Bridge, we really don't change the McCarran Bridge. The actual cross section is improved, like the amount of water that can go through with the improvements, because there's a retaining wall that goes underneath the McCarran Bridge right now on the south. That's removed and replaced with the sidewalk, and therefore the opening is greatly improved. We get additional freeboard performance on the McCarran Bridge, so that's been considered as well. Did I hit them all?
Well, I think on cost, I think when you start like laying out, well, gee, if we just put the levee here, it'll be cheaper. The problem is That levee has to be taller. That levee has to have stronger revetment because the velocities are going to be higher. And there's just a bunch of considerations that have to be made. And if you have to make the levee higher and you're not moving it much to the south, then you're going to start getting into the north properties. So there's a lot of things that go into the cost analysis. And we've been back and forth on this. This is why we spent months and months on the alternatives analysis beyond what we thought we would. And so you say we're at 30%, but we've really gone through this to try to optimize this with a number of people with lots of differing opinions. We've had geomorphologists, hydraulic engineers, geotechnical people all looking at this, coming at it somewhat differently. And this is what they came up with. And I just think on the cost thing, it's a little bit, I don't know. Though it's just you really don't know, honestly, on the cost. The cost claim, I don't perceive that. Because I know what went into those costs. So I appreciate the comments, but the cost thing is
Yeah, there was
there's
a
a
lot of
lot to that.
I think that kind of ties into the next comment we have in the chat. And I think it would be good to talk more about the model of the river, because I didn't know about it before I started working here. And I think maybe it would be helpful for other people. They said DRI had a science talk and their models predict more rain and snow events. Have these models been looked at in the channel design, and would warmer temperatures or more rain affect flood frequency? And I know you guys can put like weather events into the model, and that kind of thing. So maybe you guys can talk about that.
One of the reasons we're doing a 117 plus 3 feet is because of the potential for changes. What DRI had is what's called the arc storm. And we actually did a lot of the work for them. We provided them with some mapping for the impacts of the arc storm. So I'm very familiar with the arc storm because of that. And we had a different consultant, not this consultant, but a different consultant help out with that. That we supported. So we've worked closely with DRI on that. And yes, there can be differences over time. And I think the biggest difference is I think we don't fully understand what the system does. We don't have as much knowledge as we think we do. And because of that, we want to be conservative. And that's why it's a 117 plus 3 feet. That makes it it can hold a much larger event than just 100-year flow there with that configuration. And that's why. That's my answer to that.
Okay.
Yeah. So yes, we have looked at that and talked with them, and we were even acknowledged in their paper about, helping out.
Yeah, so those models are definitely part of this consideration. That makes a lot of sense.
Not part of this design, no, because that is
Mhm.
it's something called the arc storm. It's basically a month-long storm that happened in 1862 that is enhanced for assumptions made about global climate change. So it's an event. It probably works out to about a 400-year event. And I mean, I'm not gonna, there is a limit to what you can protect for. It becomes too expensive or it just doesn't work at some point. So we're trying to balance that nobody, except for nuclear reactors and dams, do we try to protect for every storm.
Right.
That there is a place where a storm gets so big and so rare that we can't deal with it.
Okay. It looks like we have another one. It says, can core levees get built first? This is the main issue. The recreation fields are wonderful and the overall project appears to have a lot of add-ons, but can the money currently saved get approved for levies and then used soon?
Yeah, the money is not what's stopping us. We have to get a design and we have to get permitted. We have enough cash flow and we have enough money saved. We have enough money saved right now to do another project called Vista Narrows tomorrow. We could pay for that with our existing cash, for instance, but it has to get permitted and we have to get to final design. So our critical path, if you understand what that term means, what's really holding us up is we have to get this design, we have to get a decent cost estimate of all these projects, and then we have to look at how are we going to finance this. We do have a decent cash flow every year that we can use for bonding or loans, a 30-year loan, and then we can do this whole thing. And then, and I think that's appropriate because the people that will be paying back the loans and the taxes are going to benefit from this thing by not having a large flood impact them. So that's kind of how we're looking at it. Money really isn't the problem unless we do too much park stuff. And so we're trying to balance that here.
Gotcha. Okay. Is there anyone else with a question? Go ahead and raise your hand or drop it in the chat. Okay, well, I think we're about good.
Okay, well, I appreciate all the questions. As you can tell, I'll answer the questions as straightforwardly as I can. I'm not going to pull punches, but I do appreciate all questions. And sometimes you guys get me, and I'm like, okay, we need to consider that. I think like the parking lot one. I mean, maybe not 1,000 over, but yeah, I think maybe we got too many parking spots. We'll have to check that, for instance. So I think that it's really good to have these and these comments and even, think through again, how this is configured, what kind of things can we do, and all those things. So I really appreciate it. We still have 35 people. We had, I think, in the high 40s. But thank you for sticking around for all these questions and comments and adding your comments. And even if I sound a little grumpy with you, I really appreciate your comments, all of you. So thanks again. And the next step here will be we will be taking this to our board, getting suggestions for the 60% and then going for 60%. So we're in a progression here to get to design, full design and construction. That's where we're going with this. And thank you for joining us on the journey. Thanks.
All right. And then in the chat, I put our email. If you have any additional written comments, please email them to that email by July 3rd, and that will be included on this meeting's comments. All right.
All right. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. Have a good one.